Hi, welcome to 1.5 Design Challenge. Are you ready to create some angles and triangles? So what we're going to do is we're going to take what we learned from our last video about measuring angles, and we're going to take that and combine it with actual drawing. So are you ready? Well, let's get going. Let's go over a few things that we should know by now. So the first thing that we want to talk about is common benchmark angles. The first one is a circle. So if we start at one point and come all the way around, we have a 360-degree angle, or a circle as we know it. We have a right angle here, and as we know, right angles make 90 degrees. Half of a 90-degree angle is 45 degrees. We know if we put two 90 degrees together, we have a straight angle, which makes 180 degrees. And if we had three right angles together or did 3/4 of a turn, we'd have 270 degrees. The next thing, acute angles. We know that acute angles are any angles that measure out to be less than 90 degrees. Then we also have obtuse angles. Obtuse angles are angles that measure out to be greater than 90 degrees. We have those, so let's get going. Okay, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to use a protractor, and we're going to draw an acute angle. Now with this protractor, as you can see, as we went over last time, it has that center hole where we always put our vertex. It has this line right here that we always line up for our initial side, and then we figure out what our end side is based upon, sorry this doesn't work that great, the ruler here that measures in degrees. So let's get going. So I'm going to put it down here. I am going to make my vertex right here in the center, and then I'm going to follow this line all the way out here, and I'm going to make a line as if it is extended out of this initial line here on the protractor. Let's make a 50-degree angle. So then the next thing I'm going to do, because here's the 90 and I know 50 is less than 90, I'm going to come over here to the 50 and I'm going to make a little line right here. That tells me that right here, in comparison to my vertex, will make me a 50-degree angle. Then it's real simple. It's almost like connecting the dots. So we take and we line up the edge of our protractor with that line and our vertex. We draw a line, and then we can put an arrow on the end, and we'll do the same thing over here. Now just because I put this line all the way out here doesn't necessarily mean that I need to make my line that long. I can make it any length that I want. It's probably best that you use a pencil, but because I'm doing the video, I need to use pens. Okay? So I'm lining it up with my vertex, and I'm going to make it so that this is all even on the edge here. Now I'm going to make a line out to here, a ray. Okay? Now I have an angle. Now let's double check to make sure it ended up being 50 degrees. So I put the vertex in the center point area here. I am going to line up the initial side with the line on the protractor, and I'm going to come over here and just double check that it says 50. And guess what? It does. So we have made a 50-degree angle with a protractor. How about that? Okay, next, let's make an obtuse angle. This time we're going to practice using the angle ruler. On the angle ruler, as we noticed last time, we can see that it has the degree measurements here in a circle, just like a real circle would have 360 degrees. So this time let's make a 100-degree angle. So I'm going to find 100 degrees on guide here, and I'm going to line up my initial line to where the 100 is. Now remember that each one of these notches is 5 degrees, so we're going to move it over here. So there's 100 degrees. Now notice this one always says 0. So we always line the initial line up with the guide and tells us which degrees we're making. Okay. So we're simply going to put this down on the paper, and just as if we were measuring, we're going to go right to the rivet for where we're going to put our vertex. Okay, so there's my vertex. Now, what's really cool about these angle rulers is that every so often it has these little holes that go through the rulers. Now, as long as this is measured up on the initial side, I can go and I can put a dot in that, and that's going to line it up with the initial side. The next thing that I can do is I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go up here and I'm going to look for one of those holes, and I'm going to put a dot through there on that hole. So we end up really truly connecting the dots. So I'm going to connect my vertex with the dot that I made over here on this side, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to connect my dot of my vertex to the dot over here, or the point over here, and then I'm going to double check to make sure I have a 100-degree angle. Now I know it's going to be a little bit more than a 90-degree angle, and so I'm going to put my circle rivet right here over the vertex. I'm going to line up my initial side with 100, and I'm going to make sure the 0 side is lined up with the end side, and look, sure enough, 100 degrees. We've made a 100-degree angle. So far we've been able to make an acute and an obtuse angle using a protractor and an angle ruler. All right, let's take it to the next step. Let's go ahead and talk about complementary angles. Now, from our last lesson, we know that two angles that are connected to each other that equal 90 degrees are considered complementary angles. And we'll start with a protractor this time. We're going to make ourselves a 90-degree angle to begin with. So I'm going to start with putting my dot in the center point here for our vertex. I'm going to follow this initial line out, not the edge of my protractor, but put the initial line here as if we're extending off the protractor onto the page. Now we're going to put our little line up here at 90 degrees. Then we're going to pull this away, and then we're going to use our straight edge to line these up here. Now I don't have to make it as long as the mark. Like I said, if you use a pencil, you can erase that later. But this can show you how we can connect those. Now we're going to put our arrow, so now we have a ray. And then we're going to go over here, and I'm going to line these up on the edge again. Now I'm not going to go out as far this time as I made my line. But as long as I have this lined up to the edge, just like my vertex is, I know I'll end up with the right degree of angle. So I'm going to make that into ray. Now I have a 90-degree angle, and we can double check that by putting the vertex into the hole, looking for this at 90 degrees and making sure that this is lined up right here on the initial side. And sure enough, we have a 90-degree angle. Now I'm going to make an angle inside here so that together these become complementary angles that equal 90 degrees. Now I think I'm going to make a 70-degree angle. So to do that, I'm going to put the hole over the vertex. I am going to line up the line, okay, on the initial line here, not on the edge, remember, on the initial side here of the protractor. Then I am going to mark at my 70 degree, and then I'm simply going to line up my edge with the mark that I made and my vertex. And there we go. We have a 70-degree angle. Now let's double check. We'll put the vertex here, line up on the initial side, and sure enough, there's 70 degrees. Now, what's this angle's measurement? Well, we don't even have to measure it, do we? All we have to do, if both of these equal 90, we just simply have to go 90 minus 70, just like we learned in our last video. And this gives us 20 degrees left. Okay, so we know that this angle from here to here is 20 degrees. All right, so now we've done a complementary angle using a protractor. Let's talk about supplementary angles. Okay, and we know that two angles that are connected and they form total measurement is 180 degrees form supplementary angles. Okay, so let's start out with, or 180-degree angle, which we know is simply a straight line. We're going to put a vertex right here, okay, and we know from here to here makes 180 degrees. Now within here I need another angle again. So this time I think I'm going to make the angle, let's say 120 degrees. So I've lined it up at 120 degrees on the initial side, and you can see the end side is at 0. I'm going to put it here at my vertex that I made. I am going to line up my initial line. I'm going to make sure I move this so that it says 120 degrees right there, okay? And then I'm simply just going to put a dot in one of those holes on the end side. Now all I have to do is do dot to dot again. Start with my vertex, and I'm going to move my line out to the dot that I made. And all I have to do now is put the arrow there, and now I have two angles. Now this angle will double check. The rivet circle on the vertex. We'll line this up on the end, and we will line up our 0, our end line, or end side over here, and sure enough, we have 120 degrees. Oh my goodness, so what is this angle? You'll pause the video now, and you'll tell me the steps that we need to take to find out the answer, and let me know what the answer is. Okay, got it? All right, let's find out if you're right. Okay, so I'm going to start with 180 degrees. I'm going to subtract the 120 that I know is sitting right here, and I also know that this whole entire thing here will give me 180 degrees. Okay, so 180 minus 120 is 60 degrees. Now the other thing is, from a visual, I can also see that this would be 90 degrees, right? And that's definitely smaller. It looks about 2/3 of a 90, doesn't it? Okay? All right, great job. All right, now we're going to move on, and we're going to do something even more spectacular, something so tricky, it's awesome. We are going to make a triangle. Now, I just made a triangle, and you're like, well, what's the big deal, Mrs. Smith? Well, we're going to go make a triangle based on one of the angles being 35 degrees. One of the sides have to be 1 inch. One of the other sides has to be 1.5 inches. Oh no, what are we going to do? Well, the first thing that we're going to do, we always remember to start with an angle. Always start with an angle. Okay? All right, so we're going to start with the 35 degrees. Now, you already know how to make a 35-degree angle. We've already done that, and I'm sure you can do this. So we're going to use our angle ruler. We're going to move the initial side so it reads at 35 degrees. We're going to put it down here, and we're going to put our vertex in, the rivet hole, and we're going to use the holes here on the initial side, and I'm going to put a dot right here in this first hole. Now I can't use this first dot because this ruler is on top of this ruler. And if I put a dot there, it's just going to make a mark on my ruler underneath. So I'm going to move it out here to this next dot and then put a dot right there. Now we're not necessarily going to use this whole entire thing, because remember, one side has to be 1 inch and the other has to be 1.5 inch. And like I said before, it's a good thing to use a pencil so you can erase. But because I need to use a pen so you can see this, so I'm going to line up the 2 dots on the edge of the ruler. I'm going to connect my dots, or my points, and I'm going to do the same thing here, starting with the vertex over to the other one. I've lined them up. I'm going to connect these 2 points. Okay, now I have an angle, right? Okay, so let's double check to make sure that it's 35 degrees. So there's the 35 degrees here. It's all lined up on the initial side. The vertex is in the rivet, and sure enough, that lines up. So we have a 35-degree angle, okay? Now, I need 1 inch here. So the cool thing about this angle ruler is that we can line up at the beginning of the ruler, and we can measure this line out to be 1 inch. So I'm going to put a little line right there. I know that this is 1 inch. So that's going to be one of my sides. The other side, I need to be 1.5 inches. So again, I'm going to start at my vertex. I'm going to use my ruler here, and I'm going to measure to 1.5. Okay, so we have our 35-degree angle. we have 1 inch side, we have a 1.5 inch side. Then to make this a true triangle, all I have to do now is connect these 2 dots that I've made on these lines. And if I had an eraser, I could come and erase these 2, and here we go. We have a triangle with 1 inch, 1.5 inch, and with our 35-degree angle. I think you have all it takes now to go and do your assignment yourself. Now, remember, you can always come back and rewatch this video again. Hopefully you've taken really good notes and stopped and said, this is what I do first, this is what I do second, this is what I do third. And I think you just have a short quiz here and you'll be ready to start. Thanks for listening.